I'm Jeff Kaplan, and I am a partner in Concept Neighborhood. We are a for-profit community development company working on what we think is the first project to connect Houston's light rail system to the Bayou Trails. And the vision is to create Houston's most inclusive, walkable, connected corridor. And we think there's a lack. There's just a supply and demand misalignment in our region of millions of people for an authentic, walkable neighborhood. I spoke to an advisor, a mentor of mine recently who said that we basically have 4 blocks of connected, walkable urbanism and a transit corridor. Those are the blocks where mid-Main and the match, Maine, Alabama to the match. And that's it. I mean, we're just missing it. And we're a young city and people are coming here from all over the world. And it's a part of the quality of life paradigm that's different than a park. So what we want to do is look at this is in a very authentic way. We're not trying to do this like typical faux, urban mixed-use project. We're saving buildings. So we have these 13 buildings that are all in the Federal Registry of Historic Places. And to save them, we have to change the use. So what we're doing are uses that are very singular and tied to the neighborhood. So we just finished our first project. It's called The Plant, and it's very much a beta test for this sort of community wealth-driven project. Most of the merchants, 84% of the merchants are minority women-owned businesses, and most of them live in the neighborhood, meaning not in Edo. They live walkable on my block. It's like an urban village approach to neighborhood development. And what we're seeing is that it's a different way of looking at credit risk. Because my background was doing retail leasing, urban retail. So what we still look at like whether they conduct commerce and run a business, but what we really look at is how committed they are to their community, how long they've lived in the neighborhood, how many trading relationships they have with their neighbors. So in our project, most of these businesses have capital invested in them from their neighbors living across the street. And what that means is there's just a loop where they're able to listen, and when things aren't working, they can respond quickly and change their business model in a way that they can't when they're doing a multi-unit franchise type of concept. And what I'm most passionate about in Houston is retail. I'm a merchant and a developer. My first love is retail, and I've been in various different retail businesses and worked with a lot of merchants. And we're this like incredibly diverse city. People tell us we're one of the most diverse cities in the world, and we're lacking a publicly driven neighborhood where we can walk around and see how diverse our city is. So we want to create this neighborhood that sort of tells that story, celebrates how inclusive it is. And I've learned, all these things that matter, like pricing, because this neighborhood that we're in, 7703, was the 3rd fastest changed zip code in the United States in the last 12 months. So it's a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. And what we're trying to do is create this different narrative where, you can't stop growth and it's hard to stop gentrification. But there's a different way to do it where you can decrease displacement and create new innovative ways of people trading and working and breaking title in new businesses that tell a different story for our city that we don't normally see. When retailers come in and they want to look at one demographic and they'll say, take us to the neighborhood where X% of the people read Outside Magazine and made this SAT score. That's creating a homogenized retail landscape. So when you have a diverse neighborhood, that's where our city can create a new type of retail landscape. And what we're doing is looking at retail as a form of the authentic form of placemaking. And we're building the density around this mile of connected urbanism from the rail to the trails. And I'm going to leave you all with one note. This is the corridor, and you can see the bottom is the rail stop. And what we've done is kind of quietly assembled this approximately 18 acres on 2 streets that we're kind of rewilding. And we have this old abandoned Union Pacific Rail easement that will be kind of like a belt line or low line, like the high line of New York City, but a Houston version of that takes you from the neighborhood to the Bayou Trails. And I'm going to leave you with one anecdote. I was in San Francisco right before the pandemic, and there's this guy named Ezra Klein who writes for the New York Times, and he just wrote this book about why America is so divided. And he presented his book, and at the end of his talk, he said that the key to reducing division in the United States is upzoning. And somebody raised their hand, and they were like, what does upzoning mean? And Ezra said, well, basically, Houston, Texas is the city to look at. Because Houston is already the most diverse city in the Western world. They just have to fix their parking codes. They already have no zoning. Because other cities are stuck in these decade-long battles to upzone, which means rich and poor people can't live together and create new concepts and new innovation. Houston doesn't have to change its zoning codes. We just have to fix our parking codes. And what Houston has done under our planning leadership recently 2 years ago, they created this transit-oriented development ordinance, which reduced our parking. And it meant everything. I never imagined how much of my life I would spend thinking about parking code and parking policy. But it's everything. That's our zoning. So it reduced it to 50%. And now there's this new ordinance called the Walkable Places Ordinance, which will take us to 0. So what we're trying to create is as close to a no parking neighborhood in the inner city of Houston. So thank you.